Westlake Mistress. It is said that the scholar Chen Baijiao, with the courtesy name Mingyan, hailed from Hebei. His family was impoverished, and he worked as a clerk under General Jiawan. Once, Chen and Jia stopped their boat on Dongting Lake, and a pig-faced dragon emerged from the water. Jiawan shot an arrow, hitting the dragon's back. A small fish was attached to the dragon's tail and caught alongside it. The dragon was tied to the mast of the ship, barely breathing, its mouth opening and closing as if beseeching for help. Chen felt pity for it and requested Jia to release the dragon. He even applied the wound medicine he carried to its arrow wound. After putting the dragon back into the water, it floated for a while and then disappeared. Over a year later, when Chen returned to his hometown in the north, he encountered a strong wind on Dongting Lake, and his boat capsized. Fortunately, he clung to a bamboo crate and drifted overnight until he was caught by a tree. As he climbed ashore, he saw a body floating on the water. It turned out to be his young servant, who had died. Chen pulled the body ashore with great effort. Grief-stricken, he sat down beside the body to rest. Looking ahead, he saw rolling hills covered in lush greenery, with willow branches swaying in the wind. There were no pedestrians in sight, and there was no way to ask for directions. From early morning until the sun was high in the sky, he felt lost and directionless. Suddenly, the limbs of the servant twitched slightly. Chen was overjoyed and massaged him. After a while, the servant vomited several bowls of water and woke up. Both of them took off their wet clothes and dried them on the rocks, finally putting them back on around noon. But they were famished and couldn't bear the hunger, so they rushed over the hills, hoping to find a village. As they reached halfway up the mountain, they heard the sound of arrows. While Chen was listening in surprise, two young women rode on swift horses. Wearing red headscarves bound around their foreheads, hairpins adorned with pheasant feathers, and dressed in violet short-sleeved garments, with green brocade belts around their waists. One held a slingshot, while the other had a falcon strapped to her arm. Chen and his servant crossed the mountain ridge and saw dozens of people on horseback hunting in the groves. All of them were beautiful women, dressed identically. Chen didn't dare to proceed further. At this point, a man ran over. Appearing to be a stable hand, Chen asked him for information. The man said, "This is where the Westlake Mistress is hunting on Shu Mountain." Chen shared his circumstances and explained that both he and his servant were hungry. The stable hand opened a package and handed them dry rations, advising, "Quickly move far away. Offending the Westlake Mistress will result in death." Fearing for his life, Chen hurriedly descended the mountain. Suddenly, he saw a dense forest with faint glimpses of pavilions and halls. Thinking it was a temple, he approached and found white walls surrounding it, with a stream outside. The red lacquered gate was half open, and a stone bridge led to it. Chen clung to the gate to peer inside and saw towers and pavilions towering into the clouds, reminiscent of a royal garden. He wondered if it might belong to an affluent family. Hesitatingly, Chen walked in, passing through ancient vines and breathing in the fragrant flowers. After a few turns, he entered another courtyard. Dozens of tall weeping willows gently brushed against the red eaves of the house. At the call of a mountain bird, flower petals fluttered down, and when a breeze blew through the garden, willow leaves drifted down like silver coins. Chen found the scene delightful. As if he had entered a fairyland. Passing through a small pavilion, he encountered a swing set high among the clouds. The swing ropes hung silently, empty and deserted. Chen suspected he was nearing a lady's chamber and didn't dare to advance further. After a while, he heard the sound of horse hooves coming from outside the gate, along with the laughter of women. Chen and his servant quickly hid in the bushes. After a while, the laughter drew closer, and a woman said, "Our luck with the hunt is bad today. We've caught a few animals." Another woman added, "If the princess hadn't shot down a few flying geese, our efforts would have been in vain." Not long after, several women in red gathered round a young girl who sat down in the pavilion. The girl was dressed in warrior attire, perhaps around 14 or 15 years old. Her hair was like a cluster of clouds. Her slender waist seemed fragile in the wind, and even the most precious flowers paled in comparison to her beauty. Some women held tea, others lit incense, and their magnificent clothes gleamed like piled brocade. After a while, the young girl stood up and walked down the stone steps. One woman said, "Princess, you've been riding hard. Can you still swing?" The princess agreed with a smile. Some women supported her shoulders, others linked arms, and one held her dress, while another held her shoes, helping her onto the swing. The princess extended her snow-white arms, exerted force with her feet, and flew into the sky like a graceful swallow. After swinging, the women helped the princess down, all saying, "The princess truly is a celestial being." They laughed and laughed. Chen secretly watched for a long time, his mind elated. Once the laughter faded, he emerged from the bushes and paced beneath the swing, lost in thought. He saw a red scarf below the fence, which he recognized as belonging to the women. He picked it up with delight and tucked it into his sleeve. Climbing up a small pavilion, he found writing materials on the table and penned a poem on the red scarf. Who among the refined dares to be a half-immortal? Clearly, these jade-like women surpass golden lotuses. Amidst the lunar palace's retinue, jealousy surely abounds. Don't believe they ascend the 9 heavens over ripples. After finishing, he recited the poem as he walked down from the pavilion. Following the original path back, he discovered that each gate was now locked. Chen felt helpless and returned to explore the towers and pavilions once more. A woman quietly entered, surprised to see Chen, and asked, "How did you end up here?" Chen made a bow and said, "I'm a lost traveler. Could you offer me assistance?" The woman asked, "Did you pick up a red scarf?" Chen replied, "I did, but it got dirty. What should I do?" He took out the red scarf. The woman was greatly alarmed and said, "You're doomed. This is something the princess uses frequently. With it in such a state, how will you explain yourself?" Chen's face turned pale with fear, and he pleaded with the woman to intercede on his behalf and spare him. The woman said, "You spied on the court's affairs, a crime that cannot be forgiven. I had intended to help you in secret because you are a refined scholar, but now you've brought calamity upon yourself. What can I do?" She took the red scarf in haste and laughed. Chen's heart raced with anxiety, wishing he had wings to fly away, but he could only wait with bated breath for his fate. After a long time, the woman returned and congratulated him in a hushed voice. "You might have a chance at survival." The princess looked at the red scarf 3 or 4 times, and her expression was calm. Without anger, perhaps she will let you go. You should be patient and not climb trees or jump walls if you're discovered. There will be no mercy. At this point, the sky had grown dark. Whether it was a fortunate or unfortunate situation remained uncertain. Hungry and unable to bear it any longer, Chen was overwhelmed with worry. Before long, the woman arrived with a lamp. A maid carrying a food box and wine jug accompanied her, ready to serve Chen his meal. Anxiously, Chen inquired about the situation. The woman explained, "I took the opportunity to speak to the princess just now, the scholar in the garden. Spare his life if you can, otherwise, he'll starve to death." After pondering for a moment, the princess said, "Where can he go in the middle of the night? So she sent me to bring you food." This isn't a bad sign. Chen spent a restless night filled with anxiety. As the sun rose high in the sky the next day, the woman came again to deliver his meal. Chen pleaded with her to intercede on his behalf. The woman responded, "The princess didn't order your execution, nor did she order your release. We servants dare not be chatty and annoying, lest we cause trouble." As the sun began to set, Chen anxiously awaited, and suddenly, the woman rushed in, gasping for breath, and said, "Trouble? Someone with loose lips leaked this to the queen." She opened the red scarf, threw it on the ground, and cursed vehemently. Disaster is looming. Chen was shocked, his face ashen. He knelt on the ground and begged for help. Just then, the sounds of voices and commotion grew closer. The woman waved her hand and retreated. Several people arrived, carrying ropes, and approaching menacingly. Among them was a maid who scrutinized Chen and said, "Who do we have here? Is it Chen Lang?" She stopped the person with the ropes and said, "Don't act yet. I'll report to the princess first." She hurriedly left. After a while, she returned and said, "The princess invites Chen Lang in." Trembling, Chen followed her, passing through numerous gates, until he arrived at a palace. Blue curtains with silver hooks adorned the doors. A beautiful woman immediately lifted the curtain and called out, "Chen Lang has arrived." Chen saw a beautiful woman sitting in the hall, dressed in radiant attire. He quickly knelt and kowtowed, saying, "A distant subject from afar begs for mercy." The princess stood up and personally helped him up, saying, "If not for you, I wouldn't be where I am today." The maids were ignorant and offended a distinguished guest. Their crime is beyond redemption. She ordered a sumptuous feast to be prepared and handed Chen a carved wine cup. Chen was bewildered, not understanding the reason. The princess said, "I owe you my life, and I've always regretted not being able to repay you. My young daughter grew fond of you when you treated her kindly. It must be fate. Tonight, she will serve you." Chen was taken aback, his expression dazed, not knowing how to respond. As the evening approached, a maid entered and reported, "The princess has finished dressing." She then led Chen to a new room. Suddenly, pipes and flutes played in unison, flower carpets lined the steps, lanterns hung everywhere on the porch and fence corners. Dozens of enchanting women supported the princess and Chen as they exchanged bows. The fragrance of orchids and musk filled the palace courtyard. After the greetings, Chen and the princess entered the bedroom arm in arm, displaying deep affection. Chen said, "As an outsider, I never thought I would have the fortune to escape death and instead be bestowed with a marriage." The princess responded, "My mother is the consort of the Lord of Dongting Lake and the daughter of the king of the Yangtze River. Last year, when she visited her family, she happened to be on the lake and was hit by a stray arrow. Thank you for saving her and giving her medicine for the wound. Our entire family is grateful, and we have kept it in our hearts. Don't doubt me because I'm different. I gained longevity secrets from the Dragon King and wish to share it with you." Only then did Chen realize she was a divine being. He asked, "How did the maid recognize me?" The princess said, "On that day on the boat, there was a small fish attached to the dragon's tail. That fish is this maid." Chen further inquired, "Since you're not going to kill me, why haven't you released me yet?" The princess smiled and said, "I truly admire your talent, but I can't make that decision on my own. I spent the night in turmoil. How could others know?" Chen sighed and said, "You are indeed my soulmate." "Who was the one who brought me food?" The princess answered, "Her name is Anian, and she's also very close to my heart." Chen asked, "How can I repay her?" The princess smiled and said, "She will serve you for a long time. You can gradually repay her." Chen asked again, "Where is the Lord?" The princess said, "He went with Guangong to subdue Kaiyu and hasn't returned yet." After a few days, Chen worried that his family had not received any news and might be concerned about him. He wrote a letter of reassurance and sent his young servant to deliver it. The people at his home had heard that Chen had capsized on Dongting Lake, and his wife had been wearing mourning clothes for over a year. When the young servant returned, they learned that he had survived, but communication had been severed. Nonetheless, they feared Chen might not be able to return. Another half a year passed, and Chen suddenly returned. He was dressed splendidly, and his horses and clothes were of the finest quality. His pockets were filled with precious jewels. From then on, Chen's wealth grew to an incredible extent, surpassing even the wealthiest families. In the subsequent 7 or 8 years, Chen fathered 5 sons. Every day he held banquets to entertain guests, and his houses, food, and drink were extravagantly lavish. When people inquired about Chen's experiences, he recounted them in detail, not omitting anything. One of Chen's childhood friends, Liaozhai, who had become an official in the south for more than a decade, passed through Dongting Lake on his way home. He saw a painted boat adorned with red windows and railings, floating gently amidst the misty waves, with the sound of flutes and songs. Occasionally, a beautiful woman would open a window and look out. Liaozhai peered into the boat and saw a young man without a hat, sitting cross-legged on the deck, and a beautiful girl of 15 or 16 massaging him. He assumed that the man must be a high-ranking official from the area, though he seemed to have few attendants. He observed the scene more closely and realized it was Chen Mingyan. Liaozhai leaned on the boat rail and loudly called out to him. Hearing the shout, Chen ordered the boat to stop, came out to the bow, and invited Liang Zizhen onto the boat. Seeing that remnants of a meal covered the table and the wine mist still lingered, Chen quickly cleared the leftovers. In a short while, 5 beautiful maids brought in wine, steeped tea, and laid out exquisite dishes of rare delicacies, all of which were unfamiliar to Liang Zizhen. He was amazed and exclaimed, 10 years have passed, and yet you have attained such wealth and luxury. Chen smiled and replied, did you underestimate a poor scholar's ability to prosper? Liang Zizhen asked. Who is the one drinking with you just now? Chen said. She is my wife. Liang Zizhen was even more astonished and asked, where are you planning to go with your family? Chen answered, we're heading west. Liang Zizhen was about to ask more questions, but Chen hastily ordered music to encourage drinking. Just as he finished speaking, the music roared like thunder, and a clamor ensued, drowning out all laughter. Liang Zizhen saw beautiful women filling the room, and seizing the opportunity in his inebriation, he loudly said, Master Minion, can you really make me lose myself? Chen laughed and said, you're drunk, but with this much money, enough to buy a beautiful concubine, I can give it to an old friend. He then had a maid bring a pearl and said, with this, it's not hard to find a pretty woman, to show you that I'm not stingy. After saying this, he bid farewell, saying, minor matters require my attention, and I can't stay long with an old friend. After escorting Liang Zizhen off the boat, Chen's vessel untied its moorings and set sail on its own. When Liang Zizhen returned, he visited Chen's home and found him drinking with guests. Even more puzzled, he asked, you were on Donding Lake yesterday, so how did you return so quickly? Chen replied, that's not true. Liang Zizhen recounted the scene from the day before, and the entire room was astonished. Chen smiled and said, you're mistaken. Could I have split myself in two? Everyone was amazed, but they still couldn't fathom the reason. Eventually, Chen lived to the age of 81 and passed away. When he was buried, people were surprised to find that the coffin was too light. Upon opening it, they discovered it was an empty casket.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.